do with what you will. This, oh, speaking of Peter, here he is in the waiting room. Come on in, Peter. This reading is being recorded, so just to let you know that in terms of how you want to, whether you want your video on or off for these kinds of things. I hope that you'll turn your, well, I guess here's what I hope that first, maybe I noticed many of you have your video off, which actually is great, as awkward as it might be for TC to read to some blank screens. It is a measure to help preserve bandwidth so that hopefully we'll not encounter any technical difficulties during the reading. That said, afterward, when we're doing a Q&A conversation, I hope that you'll turn your video on because we want to see you and, and hear from you. So speaking of that Q&A, develop your cues, formulate your cues, and hopefully there will be some A's and you can have some conversation to follow the reading. Okay. I think that's all the announcements. So now I'm very pleased to introduce T.C. Tolbert, who identifies as a trans and genderqueer feminist, collaborator, mover, and poet. And he's a human in love with humans doing human things. Maybe one of my favorite bio lines. He's the author of Gephyromania from Asada Press, 5 chapbooks, and co-editor with Trace Peterson of Troubling the Line, Trans and Genderqueer Poetry and Poetics from Nightboat Books. TC was awarded an Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellowship for his work with trans, non-binary, and queer folks as Tucson's Poet Laureate. In Gephyromania, Tolbert writes, quote, "I is so many words. Gephyromania, the word itself, refers to an obsession with bridges, and so TC's writing is marked by striking multiplicity and association as words, lines, and phrases juxtapose in compelling and surprising ways. As trajectories of selfhood, embodiment, language, and memory coalesce in TC's writing, these movements across and between enact a resistance to stasis and the singular self, the singular life, the singular meaning. Quote, I go back to that no, and I sing from it. TC's poems sing possibility and love, and as joy-laden notes of TC's writing, the love here, quote, the love here doesn't alter, but the speaker does, and the music of these poems is the music of body and soul soaring together as they tear apart. It's a great pleasure to welcome TC Tolbert.
Hey, thank you so much, Mike. Thank you. If y'all ever get a chance to visit Woodland Pattern, or put some money in the tip jar. I've just been so lucky to work with Mike and everyone there, and I'm so thankful. This was all originally supposed to be, in person. I was going to be up in Wisconsin, and they have just been incredible about making the shift and being flexible and helping me to sort of re-see the workshop and make that happen. So I just want to thank you all so much. Thanks, Mike. And thank you all for being here on a Sunday evening staring at our computer screens. I have to say, this has never happened before. I don't think this has ever happened in my entire life. My mom and my sister are in this poetry reading. Like, this is so cool. So that's really, I might cry. I am going to share my screen so that you can follow along. This is Delilah in the background. This is Marie. Marie has been snoring, so you might even get a little bonus soundtrack. The poems, I'm essentially going to, once I start reading, just kind of read straight through. But a lot of what I've chosen to read this evening is really in response to the workshop that we did earlier today and yesterday, called The Freedom in the Constraint. And these poems are constrained in various ways, but the one constraint that you'll see come up again and again is called an acrostic, where the beginning letters of each line spell something, either a name, it's actually usually a name of someone, or a place that I'm meditating on. And The first poem, excuse me, that I will read, the letters are in the center of the lines, and they're sort of acting, I'm hoping, as a kind of hinge. And the poem is called Masculinity, because that seems to be the place I'm most comfortable. So I'm gonna get my screen shared here so that you can see what's up. Let's see. That's not the one I want you to see. Can you all see the line that says "in our lifetimes," or do you see "a man's arms may trick"?
I can see the line "in our lifetimes."
Oh, you can. Okay, great. That's the one I want to start with. Excellent. So, sorry, one other or two other pieces of information that will be helpful for these poems. My birth name is Melissa, and a lot of the poems that I've been writing for the last several years are addressing her and sort of thinking about what does she see, what did she see, and is she sort of essentially like, is she proud of the person that I've become? When I think about my younger self, above all, like, I want her to be like, good job. So I've begun addressing her directly in my poems, and so you'll see her name come up quite a bit, and then also you'll see a lot of references, or at least one or two, to various kinds of violence, including references to suicidal ideation. So I just wanted you to have a heads up about that. All right. In our lifetimes, 40% of trans people will attempt suicide. I did. I am. Men could not see me as one of them, and what can I be but thankful? I was a girl, and for that, I was never given a gun. A word alongside another word placed in God's mouth incorrectly may be slower, but no less direct. If Melissa, is she apologizing for all the names she's learned to sharpen her body somehow into a kind of relief from that fact? What I know of logic comes from being touched by a corpse flower, kneeling to that which promises us injury, inflorescence. You until you are holy, you until you are not. Every day I depend on how we language me. Melissa understands that between her I sleep like a shovel, like a saw blade, still between hands, wants to turn, wants something difficult to cut. What I want is to hear someone I loved tell me not to die from my own tongue. Tell me the passing itself is holy, a grief hymn no God would want to sing without us. The invisible parts of my body are not the only ones I want to know love. I repeat the prayer I am most afraid of. Why did you not protect her? Why cannot the day be longer any day? You hurt me doing absolutely nothing. Here is a mirror. I miss it already. You learning me. All of us looking at our hands. So you can see in that piece, masculinity is right down the center. A man's arms may trick his shadow, Melissa, may become the open chamber he longs to live inside. Held in the lungs of another, what unforetold music may emerge even from the hair of a horse stretched between two bent ends of a Pernambuco stick and then rubbed against a dried and twisted selection of a young sheep's gut. It is 2019, and every day now the world's windows rattle. Sunrise, that relentless bastard, still searches the dirt for what has the potential to explode. What cannot become louder, larger, if only by eventually allowing itself to be slammed shut. Perhaps this is another way of singing into everyday's disappearance, enlarging what survives without justification. Here I am, having never learned how to keep this too the work of every beating body, time. What if we did not suspect the dead of going on somewhere without us? Would we call our own names? If we knew the very wind pushing through each fence, each room was to be remembered as another's expelled breath. Silent, looking at you now, shaping sound strikes me as departure practice. Lifting up from the shoulders a little, listening for the measure marked tacit. Wave after wave expanding against one another. Underneath loss lives touch. There's so many of these poems that I wrote last summer when I was, one of my sort of preferred ways of writing is to completely seclude myself, really cut myself off from internet and, just like sort of check in with people via text every so often. And last summer, I was lucky enough to be able to go to a friend's sort of tiny house in the woods of Canada, like all off grid. And I was there for a month. Anyway, so it was really this chosen constraint, to use the language of earlier today, of being, without touch and without much contact with people. And, the loneliness, as we all know now, can show up so quickly and so intensely. So it's been really powerful to sort of experience these poems almost as sort of looking forward to this time, like putting language on something that I didn't know I would, that so many of us, including myself, would be experiencing all over again, but this time without choosing it, so to speak. I suppose I could go running through the streets without a mask on, but I'm not going to do that. Anyway, in someone else's home, 2018, February 8th. You are sitting in front of a considerable yellow mirror. Carved into the frame of the mirror are flowers, the leaves of which, were they solo, could be mistaken for thumbnails lined up at a salon, waiting for the arrival of the hands to which they should be attached. There are fish underwater above you, trying to tell the night what is coming. One fish, in particular, has eyelashes and a body covered in lines, much like a topographical map. You remember there are tiny brooms all over your own skin that, even if you say stop, will not stop. You have said stop so many times before to your own body, whatever that is, and the lines being drawn upon it. Now that testosterone has occluded estrogen, there must be fewer bodies like yours or more. It's hard to say. You often mistake reflection for its lyrical sibling, and it hurts to see anything this late. The Auburn closet to your right was built after the room was finished. Closet isn't exactly the right word, but neither is metal bar with hangers inside an irregular collection of shelves. You've always been drawn to containers, repositories of any kind, strung with a simple strip of cloth. Perhaps this is why you cannot call Melissa or even Missy your dead name. You understand the problems with birth name, and still you've spent so much time bargaining to believe every name you've ever been called points at least partially to a body alive that you are willing to love today. The mirror only returns parts of what holds you to yourself. no matter the angle. And in this way, it is just like language, just like every story about transition with which you've been harassed. Faced with the haunting of our innumerable, we become severing. Your prayer was severed. Like the night to which you are repeatedly hope harnessed and into which soon enough you will pass. Dear Melissa, physicists say we change an object simply by turning our attention to it. Really, I am a grandson only when we are eating at Panera. One of us is lying always about her particular hunger. I love the children outside of me, counting to 30 while covering their eyes. Whose body will we sacrifice to be in the company of another? Each day across my ongoing, I haul the husk of her. Fire towers are designed for distance viewing, and I am right here, mothering you into the next life. Call me cover when you don't know who I could be. Times psychologic and legal assault. No one is listening to ice become water, burying you to keep us alive. So this poem is another acrostic, and it's my last name, Tolbert, here, and TC over here, and Melissa over here. So maybe I'll start with Melissa. Maybe the constraint method is bullshit. Maybe spelling estrogen with an O at the beginning is more accurate to experience than not. Maybe late is not never, not always. If you remember the boat you fell out of and the river, if you forget the reason, the boat was so lovely there, still spinning in its season of rocks. Want, you could say, is the name of the woman who raised you. Earth-licked and hinge-held. Are you? You are, aren't you? Ashamed of the shore that brought itself up to save your life. To carry the blood and not to spill it. This was your bone fruit, your only job, passing a rope to the knot. How naked a river will leave a storm lightning in the south. I night with you every night. I am bent to the name we have agreed should and should not be repeated. Line without end, I made of possible men waking inside my own body. Soundlessness, quietly, has been riveted to the seam where the tongue is in need of the throat. Come with me now into the woods toward every blessing burn each swallow tries to make of the dark. To live, if only temporarily, contiguous inside another little life. I was scrolling through a chapbook that I recently finished and I'm excited about, but I don't know where it's going. A straw-haired broom holds the hollow door open. Every bird I see, I say, please do not hear me. I never felt what I feel a line could be. My fear has made me small. Rain on an ox eye, a pigeon wet with its own name. The bell inside a metal bowl struck and then set loose by a rock. Home in search of comfort. My Melissa, whose trans body is a house without a hacksaw, a nap inside a needle, a glass vase 3/4 full of smooth stones. Whose trans aorta is a mesquite tree careening through power lines, a Cooper's hawk lit by lightning. Whose trans lungs are 2 jars full of bumblebees singing on the uncovered back porch. Even our name is a match tossed into the fire it started, an edgeless invocation. Melissa, a wind made by swinging, grass cutting through concrete, bubble wrap being danced on, albeit slowly, as if that alone could quiet the tiny explosions down the hall. Whose transarticular cartilage is string light threaded through the rafters, whose trans tunica Medea is a sliver of decorated cardboard doubling as protest sign inside the window, which only serves to emphasize the window's inefficacy against the sun. Whose trans epiglottis is an apron on a hook, whose trans trapezius are cups in the sink filled with inconsistently directed knives and spoons, whose trans metatarsals are green beans boiling on the stove, whose trans subclavian artery is organ pipe cactus under cloud cover, whose trans left ventricle is a black-capped goldfish hanging upside down to eat, whose trans lesser trochanter is a hen's claw growing around a rope, whose trans great saphenous veins are technologies of prediction, tarot, storm tracker, political polls, whose trans dead space is the undeniable pollution of light, whose trans thyroid cartilage is commission graffiti, whose trans facial hair is the gentrifier yelling gentrification, whose trans urethrocytes are dapples of daylight drug across a concrete block wall, whose trans stroke volume is a live stream filibuster, whose trans plasma is the intimacy of strangers immediate in an emergency, whose trans plasma proteins are women filling a courtroom, one by one approaching the judge, performing all the mental and physical labor of obtaining a divorce, whose trans integumentary system is the myth of meritocracy, whose trans rectum is a local philanthropic institution, whose trans bile is the taste of a slap echoing in your mother's open palm, whose trans femoral vein is a cat's claws crafted search for the sun, whose trans pharynx is an empty building brimming with trampolines, whose trans ovaries are interrobangs used unironically, whose trans ureter is a stop sign stuffed with bullet holes near a ditch filled with sunflowers near a wasp nest near a farm. Sometimes I'm afraid I am afraid of me. My trans sympathetic nervous system, my trans fatigue cracks, my trans 1 Corinthians 3:16, training the God right out of my trans temple, all trans dove, no savior, a trans baptism, holy to be a fire, trans, trembling in the tear of the trans daughter, trans tongue. How I love you now, my trans vagina, my trans manubrium, my trans Melissa, in every iteration, TC Melissa Dawn Tolbert, who was even once a Harrison, a wife to a husband. It is possible she loved me then too. Hiding, can she hear me say thank you? To my trans uterus, my trans pectoralis major, my trans penis, the highest point on earth is in the ocean. Sea stars, our bodies becoming, a trans prayer, an infinite, inexhaustible rhizome of the heart. You whose tragus is trans, whose kidneys, whose medulla oblongata, whose adrenal glands, whose cochlea, whose pleural space, whose trans sacrum is simultaneous, the site of the storm and the keel of a storm-scored boat. Whose trans erector pili muscle is the fact that no matter when this sentence is read, it will be true that someone somewhere is trying to survive a sexual assault. Whose trans inferior vena cava is a clock that has not yet been hung on the wall. I love you, time, how trans you are, your trans boredom, ribbon sharp and metal bold. You, whose bark is trans, whose recovery, whose lumen, whose partial pressure, trans, in order to live, must continue to respond to changes in the lungs. I think I'll stop there. What do I do now? I unshare my screen. Hold on. There it is.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. And okay, hi everyone.
Oh, did the poems not show up?
There was like one poem up. I sent a
the
chat.
whole damn time.
I don't think you can see the chat now, I realize. your screen sharing, I think you, for some reason, it
paused.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, sorry, y'all.
But it was wonderful to hear that. It's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, first of all, I would invite you, if you would like to share your video now so we can all see each other. That would be great. If you're so inclined. Hi. Yay. And then also ask if you have any questions or things you would like to, conversation starters, thoughts. Oh, I see a hand. Oh yeah, I should talk about how this works. I see Peter's hand, so hold on, Peter. Right, I should mention, if I see you and you're sharing your video, then you can just raise your hand like this. If you're, disinclined to share video, that's perfectly fine. You can, there's a hand raise icon, little function, little hand. Or if for whatever reason you can't find that, I don't know, like a thumbs up or something.
We have a big salad and a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, way to let me know without.
See what you want to add to it.
Oh.
It's a salad and some guacamole.
Hold on, I'm gonna mute. Okay. All right.
Deborah's having a salad.
Okay, so I saw Peter's hand, and then others. So Peter, I'm gonna unmute you now, but then others people formulate your questions. Hi, Peter.
Hi everyone. It's good to see everyone, and thanks TC for a wonderful reading. The dogs added a lot too, I have to say.
Did you see them while I was reading?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, in the beginning especially. Well, anyway, I was struck by something in the last poem that you read. The trans ovaries, pardon me if I misquote you on this, the trans ovaries of interrobangs.
Yeah.
This may be a weird question, so I'll give you, maybe take a moment. But just thinking about interrobangs, what they mean, how they're official, unofficial, like hands down my favorite punctuation mark that's not actually a punctuation mark. Just what is your relationship to interrobangs?
Well, first you don't happen to have like an ability to put an interrobang in the chat for everyone, do you? I was just going to see if that way people could see what we're talking about in case they don't know.
You know, Amy Nezakuma Tuttle taught me how to program to get it on my phone.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
Yeah, so if you type in exclamation question mark, it'll automatically do it.
It'll do it.
Let me see if I can do it in notes and make it really big. Sorry.
Well, so for folks who don't know, and we'll see if this works or not. Well, yeah.
There we go. Shoot, can you see it?
I can't see it, but
Okay.
it's essentially like an exclamation question mark combined is maybe like the best or the simplest way to describe it. And it was sort of like this close to becoming an official real piece of punctuation that was incorporated into all of our keyboards, etc. This is what, like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, maybe 75 at this point. I don't know, a while ago. And through sort of a series of shenanigans, it like didn't quite make the cut in terms of just becoming a standard part of essentially our keyboards, which is what would have made it a standard part of our lives. But it is still real. And so what's my relationship to it? I mean, I guess it's sort of my official stance on the world. You know, it might be my, what is it? It is my experience of the world. It's that whole thing of like a human being in love with humans doing human things where I'm just like, what? Like, and what? Like, just constantly shocked and in awe. Yes, thank you. There it is. That's Annette. I don't know if you can see Annette's where it's got this overlap. I just feel like I'm constantly in awe of the world, of people, of myself. I sort of never cease to be surprised and also like curious, like genuinely like, how did that come to be? So it's like my mascot. That's what I want to say. It's like the interrobang is totally my mascot. And if I were a team, maybe I am a team. Me and Melissa, we're a team. Anyway, so yeah, it really does feel that way. And then to think of the interrobang as part of as like, to compare that to my ovaries. I mean, you know, come on, what is happening in there? Like, why not? I don't know. Like, I just feel like the internal landscape of my body is completely fascinating to me on just like a technical level, and also maybe also like a psychological and spiritual level. And I'm also genuinely kind of excited to have, you know, for instance, to have had my period for however long I had it, 20 years. Like, that's an experience not everyone gets to have, and certainly not everyone with facial hair. And I think they should. Like, I think they absolutely should have that experience. And also super excited to not have it anymore. Like, you know, it's both a question and an exclamation point. So that's probably enough words about that.
Oh, thank you for that. I love it as a metaphor. I think it's perfect. And it's like, it's not just like we're having pizza for breakfast.
Yeah.
But like I think it's like the poets, it's the poet's exclamation mark, or poet's punctuation mark rather.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, TC.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
The Q&A is always super awkward, so unchanged by Zoom.
Oh, I'm muted. I see. Oops, I'm sorry. Hello, I do that so often. But does anybody else have a question or a thought, or made more awkward by my inability to unmute myself? Hey, yes. Hey. Hi.
Okay. Hi, Cece.
Hi.
Hey, y'all.
Jenny and Laura. We didn't get to see you before, which
But you did now.
I'm pretty happy that you were able to join us for this workshop, for this reading, and it's incredible to have had you. I mean, it was a brilliant reading.
I wanted to actually ask for an encore.
Yeah. Encore. She was like,
just one more.
Can we ask TC?
Is that a thing? Do poets do that?
Sometimes.
An encore.
It happens.
I guess we get to do what we want. Marie's like, I'll wake up for that. I might have, I mean, if that feels appropriate, I will do it. I also don't want to take up a bunch of time.
I don't really think you are taking up our time.
No.
Like, I still have things to say to you, but we would take another poem.
We were curious that we did want to hear about the workshop.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How was,
You know.
I'm assuming some people here went to the workshop, so I was curious just how it went, and I kind of wanted to take it myself, but obviously it was way too full.
It was too full.
We're going to do it again.
That's true.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, there are a couple of people I see here who maybe would want to say something about it. Just, I don't know, anything. I see, Rosa, are you reaching for your unmute button?
It was amazing.
Oh, come on.
It really was. I mean, I keep thinking about so much of what happened in the last couple of days in the workshop, and then I could see very clearly the relationship between those constraints in your work. I mean, in more obvious ways than the mesostic, but there are other things in there, the attention to the body parts. And then I'm even more excited because, you know, and I said this in the questionnaire that you gave us, which I think was a great idea, because usually when one teaches, you maybe have an exit questionnaire or you have an exit evaluation, but to sort of do that in the beginning, I think was, I don't know, it said something about you, about sort of like, it's not just that you're coming into my space, but I'm creating a space for you.
Mm.
I loved it. Yeah, it was great. It taught me, I mean, I love being put in the vulnerable position of being a student instead of a teacher, but it also gave me so many tools that I hope to use in the classroom as well. And I'm really grateful for that.
I'm glad. Thank you. I see other people. I see you, Jem. And I think Deborah's sort of hiding. Maya's here, Nina's here, Nora's here, Ellie's here.
All right. Well,
There
you
were so
called
many
me out.
people. I'm straight up calling you out.
You did. Well, I'm really glad that I had the chance to take this workshop, and I think you have an amazing presence. So it's just really nice to meet you, albeit via Zoom, and Rosa and the other classmates who took it. And I would say I also am a teacher, and I'm a teacher who, even though I do teach online regularly, I still had that experience of retreating to remote learning for classes that I had been meeting face to face. So I would say also that what we did in the workshop together will definitely impact what I do in the fall, since at the college I teach at, I know we're not returning to the classroom either for that semester. So I tried to take this only as a student, but that teacher mindset just gets in there. So I got a lot from it that way as well. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the big, I don't mean to sort of use this as a cop-out, but the title, The Freedom in the Constraint, really is the sort of thing that we kept sort of looking at and returning to and sort of trying to, open up a little bit. And also, the way that I've taught that particular class in other iterations, it's live, and it's with people. It's very embodied. It involves a lot of movement practices, moving across spaces, sort of giving physical constraints in that way, and then using those to think about writing practice. And so to shift this class to an online, to a Zoom format where these talking heads it was absolutely a sort of mind meltdown for me in trying to just figure out how it was going to work. And also without, I want to think about constraint metaphorically, poetically, etc., while also holding the reality that many of us are being constrained in tangible, material, life and death ways right now, right? So I didn't want to set up a class, where we just talk about it as like, ooh, it's this neat gift. Like, tell me to write in a sonnet and I just feel really good about myself because I did it. I like conquered the constraint. I really wanted to think about how we're existing in constraint all the time, and the more that we can think about what choices we make within those constraints when we have choice, practicing with almost like a low stakes practice, which is poetry, and applying that to our lives outside of or off the page is, those were, I guess, that's a pile of things I just said to think about it and be with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really beautiful, like what you just said. I think what I was curious about, like, and what I've been curious about with your poetry and this workshop in general is like, have you found, like, in this time, like a hot fall line for yourself, like with the constraint, where you've been able to produce something that has felt like a way out or a different way to produce like a particular one, perhaps.
Do you mean in the last 2 or 3 months, or do you mean just in my life?
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
just the last few months.
yeah, since we've been like in this like incredibly terrible situation, but it's also full of this potential that you're bringing out, and which I love. But yeah, 2 or 3 months.
I don't think I have in the last 2 or 3. You know, I haven't had any, in terms of, I don't know that I've had any writing breakthroughs. I do feel like I've had some living breakthroughs, which, I hold them, well, I hold them sort of simultaneously, right? Like, so I have felt like the practice that I've been doing with poems has been helping me to see, oh, these are the choices you're making now as you're freaking out. Like, this is just like when you freak out at this stage of the poem process, or, when you go to the, like, just say a bunch of things that don't make any sense because trying to make any sense of the world at all is a total sham, and this sort of response, which can be, I think, really generative and is not where I want to just stop. I see myself doing that in the ways that I sort of spin out with work, and with work that doesn't matter, and answering a bunch of emails, and kind of doing all these things. It's a parallel, I guess, sort of process that I'm trying to map, ultimately to bring myself more sanity, in my day-to-day existence. So that, which is all to say, have I had any breakthroughs with writing in the last 3 months? I don't know, but I have been returning to the page, which I think, if nothing else, that's a breakthrough, and I come back to it. And even though it has been certainly a painful and confusing as fuck time, like, I feel like I'm able to move through some of these waves a little more efficiently than I have at other times. It's like I know it's going to change. That's information I did not have before writing poems seriously, and paying attention to it. It's going to change. This is going to change. Just every time I feel stuck, it's going to change. Yeah.
Is there like a function where I'm supposed to raise my hand, or can I just do it with my real hand?
You did it with your real hand.
So one of the things that struck me about the poem, the Dear Melissa poem, which I read in APR and I really, really loved, was that it sounded like a, hold on, again. I'm talking right, you don't need to, sorry. Okay, just leave it. Thank you for showing me that. Okay, thanks. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Constraint. That was a constraint.
Yes.
So, yeah, one of the things that struck me when I read an APR too is that it very much sounds like a poem in the tradition of poems to the beloved, right? So sonnets and the entire lyric tradition in which the sonnet belongs. And it also made me think, because this is something, what you're doing is in some ways speaks to me, because it's related to a kind of writing to a former self that I'm working on as well. And I've been looking for different models, and thank you for giving me one possible model, which I can only aspire to. But I was also thinking of this book that I recently read. It's sort of autofiction memoirish by a French writer, Annie Ernaux, and it's called A Story of a Girl, or A Girl's Story. That's how it's translated, A Girl's Story, where she speaks back to herself in 1958. Like she's in her 70s and she writes back to herself, I think at 18, and working in a camp, working in a summer camp. And it's very experimental, the way that she sort of does this and thinks about the relationship between memory, time, and writing. So it's as much about writing as it is about thinking about the past. Like how do we create the self through writing? And how that is a kind of progression over time in the writing as well. So I'm curious, what writing models are there for you, or who do you go to constantly to think about, or even just who are you reading now? Who are you reading to think about how to write to the self as a beloved, or to write in the self in this way where it's not self-critical, or that you're not simply mythologizing the self. I'm curious to hear that just for my own reading list.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've actually read one of the books that immediately comes to mind that I return to all the time is Khadijah Queen's Fearful Beloved. Yeah, right? I mean, talk about a sort of compassionate and honest look at the self and the particular parts, I would say, maybe, of the self.
I thought you were going to say the other Khadijah Queen book, not the Fearful Beloved. What is it called?
What I Had On.
That one. Yeah,
what is
that's
it?
the subtitle. I can't remember the title I don't know why, but yes, it's I'm So Fine.
I'm So Fine.
Yeah,
yes.
That's the one that I was thinking about for sure.
Yeah, which is an amazing book. But no, there was the Fearful Beloved really opened something up for me. It was also, I should say, other things that really that made this turn for me in my writing. I was in a car accident, and I was really just unable to sit up for any period of time and write and type, or any of those ways that I had always processed and written. And so suddenly I was truly just lying on my back speaking into my phone. And Irene knows this because she saw a lot of it pretty close up. I turned to haiku, to the syllable. And I mean, talk about forcing me to root in my body in a way that I had never and would never have done, honestly. I mean, I just wouldn't have done it otherwise. And so there was something I just got really soft in that, like where it was like, I can't keep hating on myself. I can't kind of keep insisting on this invulnerability, whether it's in my writing and in my process, whatever it is. And that broke something open in terms of me turning also toward Melissa. I mean, that was really when I started to say, like, she's still here, I guess. Like, or she could be if I said she is invited, it softened a lot for me to just have to be in my body.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll keep thinking of people. I mean, a long reading list, but I want to really think more carefully, and I'll send you an email with like a more cold list.
I'd love that. Thank you. That's really generous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. And anybody else has a question? Also, I just keep putting it out there that was also talk about an encore, possibly. I don't know. So, just
one more poem. That's hilarious. Okay. Okay. Let me. I see you, Irene. Irene says 2 more. Oh, you know what? I think I'll read this one. I don't know that I've ever really read this poem, and I'm going to share it for real. Let's see if we can get it. Can you see what I really want to know is how rough, Melissa? Hey, the actual poem came through. Okay. What I really want to know is how rough, Melissa, the leaves below the shredded cup of the aster's face need to be before it changes species from showy aster to willow to rush. Aster radula being the name of what I thought I was seeing. Fingers first, reading the neck through touch. A kindness of soft needles. Much like the shot I give myself once a week now, having increased the gauge exponentially, which has the inverse effect on the amount of skin I'm required to surrender in order to wake up in a body I was told could not live in this world and be loved. Small is not a fair synonym for soft. Naming you, I have found another way to send my body back in time to claim how she wants to be touched. It's been over 3 weeks, and I still can't find the face of the bird that threatens music, silence, whatever you want to call it, when a well of metal triangles is wrung underwater and poured from the familiar little mouth of a ghost. Every morning I want to know without drama, really, how many things I will kill today. A question of attention, an experiment of turning God into my body, learning to live in the could mean of pine broken light. When I hid you, Melissa, I became every man who tells a woman she would be more safe if only she would keep herself inside. A hive of mercies we were backhanded into. Unknowingly praying, we wanted to unlearn how to pray. I am almost ashamed I could not name it. How little pleasure I feel when I touch things only to be touched back. That's it.
Thank you so much. That's a good closing note. I appreciate you so much, TC, for doing this, and all of you for being here. This is really wonderful. And hope to see you again soon on Zoom, and maybe sometime in real life, you know.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you taking time to hang out with me. It's so good to see all your faces. I missed you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, TC. It was great.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
It's so good to see you in person.
I know, Annette.
on a screen.
I know. Nina, I saw Nina pop on here and then she went away. Bye, y'all.
Yeah.
This is always the saddest part. I just want to go get some food. Don't you just want to like go get some cake or something?
Yeah.
God, this sucks.
Good.
I know, but it's still good to be able to do it.
I
You
know.
know,
But
in
it
our
hurts.
little cells.
This is the painful part. I'm telling you,
Yeah.
it hurts.
Good cake. Okay.
I'll go eat cake. Fine.
Right.
I'll just go eat cake on my own.
Right. We'll all go eat cake.
Exactly. Bye, y'all.